Good evening, I'm Leila Masimova and you're watching A News. Here's the top stories for tonight. Russia and Ukraine have agreed to halt military strikes on vessels in the Black Sea and port attacks on energy infrastructure, as the White House reports. U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz has taken full responsibility for the leak of sensitive details regarding a planned U.S. strike on Yemen. Kyrgyzstan has officially ratified a key border treaty with Tajikistan. A deal has been reached between American and Russian negotiators on ending military strikes against commercial vessels in the Black Sea. The White House says it believes progress is being made towards ending the conflict in Ukraine and that peace talks will continue. Our correspondent Obisha Bandar has more from Washington.
Following days of intensive talks in the Saudi Arabian capital of Riyadh, the United States, Russia and Ukraine have reached an agreement to ensure the safe navigation of commercial vessels in the Black Sea. The agreement will ensure that the vessels carrying grain and oil will not be targeted. As part of a deal negotiated between Moscow and Washington, the U.S. also agreed to help restore Russia's access to global markets for their agriculture and fertilizer exports, as well as lowering maritime insurance costs and enhancing Russian access to ports and payment systems related to transactions on the international markets. Russia's access to international markets has been severely restricted due to punishing American and European sanctions that were imposed following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In a statement posted by the White House on Tuesday, the Trump administration stated that the U.S. and Russia will further develop measures for implementing President Trump's and President Putin's agreement to ban airstrikes against energy facilities of Russia and Ukraine. The White House also announced that Moscow and Washington will continue to work towards achieving a durable and lasting peace in Ukraine. This deal is a result of separate negotiations that the U.S. held with Ukraine and Russia. It is widely viewed as a stepping stone towards peace talks between Kyiv and Moscow. U.S. officials will also continue to work in brokering exchanges of prisoners of war between Russia and Ukraine, the release of civilian detainees, and the return of forcibly transferred Ukrainian children held in Russia. Securing the safe navigation of grain and energy shipments from the Black Sea is expected to help stabilize impacted global supply chains, many of which are dependent upon grain, seed oil, and fertilizer exports from Ukraine and Russia. This will also be good news to developing countries that have been particularly hurt by rising global food prices due to the war in Ukraine. Ubisha Bandar, A News, Washington, D.C.
U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz has acknowledged creating a Signal group chat where sensitive details about planned U.S. airstrikes on Yemen were leaked. While calling it embarrassing, he insisted that the information shared was not classified.
U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz has taken full responsibility for the leak of sensitive details regarding a planned U.S. strike on Yemen. The information was shared in a Signal chat with Trump administration officials and a journalist, Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic. Goldberg's report, published on Monday, revealed that sensitive details about the operation, such as target information, weaponry and attack sequencing, were posted in the chat ahead of the May the 15th airstrikes. Initially, Goldberg declined to publish the chat details, but did so on Wednesday. In the chat were discussed the timing and rationale of attacks on the Houthis. The chat contained remarks by Trump administration officials about the preferred shortcomings of America's European allies, concerns over the exposure of crucial military details. During an interview with Fox News, Waltz confirmed his role in setting up the chat.
It's embarrassing, yes. We're going to get to the bottom of it. I just talked to Elon on the way here. We've got the best technical minds looking at how this happened. But I can tell you for 100%, I don't know this guy. I know him by his horrible reputation, and he really is the bottom scum of journalists. And I know him in the sense that he hates the president, but I don't text him. He wasn't on my phone.
President Donald Trump says that no classified information was involved and expressed confidence in Waltz's performance as National Security Advisor. The White House has since confirmed that an internal review is underway and Trump was briefed on the matter. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who allegedly shared the operational details with Goldberg, dismissed questions about the leak, accusing the journalist of spreading misinformation. Hegseth defended the airstrike campaign, asserting that it was necessary to restore deterrence and secure freedom of navigation in the region. The leak drew sharp criticism from Democratic lawmakers who called for a congressional investigation into the potential breach of national security.
And more on the subject. Joining us from Washington, D.C. is Michael Pregent, former intelligence officer and former Pentagon intelligence analyst. Great to have you with us, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Pregent, President Donald Trump and U.S. intelligence chiefs downplayed the security risks, saying no classified materials was shared. But how big is this breach or glitch, whatever one may call it? And what do you make of the content of the leak?
If this was against a more sophisticated enemy, we would have U.S. casualties. If this was against an enemy who could intercept our communications on signal and could set up air defense ambushes, this would have been catastrophic. This is a classified leak. As soon as you mention the go time, the start time, what we call H hour in the military, in an unclassified setting, you compromise intelligence. The start time of any military operation, especially one against a foreign terrorist organization, is classified at the top secret level. This is embarrassing. This is a breach. I voted for President Trump. I'm a fan of what he's doing in the United States. I am not a fan of some of the people he has put in charge of the Pentagon or the DNI position. And I'm talking about Hegseth and I'm talking about Tulsi Gabbard.
Bearing in mind the magnitude of this breach, what is the next for Michael Waltz, National Security Advisor, who took full responsibility for the leak?
So Waltz should be protected here. He doesn't know how this happened. He believes he was set up. If you watch his interview, he thinks he was set up somehow. But Hegseth's comments and his dismissal and his attack language in social media, I think is disqualifying. It's embarrassing. A lot of us question whether or not he was up to this job. He's great at focusing the Pentagon on its warfighting mission and getting away from what we call in the United States woke policies. But when it comes to this cheerleading on a encryption app, sensitive details that could have compromised U.S. pilots, it's embarrassing, it's sophomoric, and it's disqualifying.
Thank you very much for joining, Mr. Pregent.
Thank you.
U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance is visiting Greenland with a focus on national security. The visit comes amid growing tensions over Greenland's strategic importance, which has drawn criticism from local political leaders.
US Vice President J.D. Vance will accompany his wife on a trip to Greenland, stating that its security is vital for global stability. While the visit was initially planned as a cultural trip, Vance's participation has shifted the focus to national security. He plans to visit a Space Force outpost on Greenland's northwest coast, emphasizing concerns over growing threats in the Arctic region.
A lot of other countries have threatened Greenland, have threatened to use its territories and its waterways to threaten the United States, to threaten Canada, and of course to threaten the people of Greenland. So we're going to check out how things are going there.
A Greenlandic MP criticised US Vice President J.D. Vance's planned visit, calling it disrespectful to Greenland's political process.
I think the whole process has been quite chaotic. I think it's fair to say that there hasn't been respect for the political processes in Greenland. We have negotiations about the upcoming government of Greenland, Naalakkersuisut, and we also have an election for the municipalities, and therefore I think it's been disrespectful, and in many ways I think the timing is wrong.
Greenland, an autonomous territory of Denmark, holds significant strategic value due to its location and vast natural resources. In March 2025, US President Donald Trump reiterated his desire for the United States to annex Greenland, emphasizing its strategic importance for national and international security. Greenland's outgoing Prime Minister, Mute Egede, condemned the US approach as highly aggressive, while Denmark's Prime Minister accused Washington of exerting undue pressure. The recent March 2025 elections in Greenland saw significant shifts, with the centre-right Democrats securing 10 seats, signalling a potential change in government direction. As coalition talks begin, the new political landscape may influence Greenland's stance on its relationship with the US and its Arctic interests.
UN calls on the international community for fast and broad sanction easing on Syria. Fragility and hope mark new era in Syria amid ongoing violence and aid struggles.
UN called for urgent international action to ease sanctions on Syria to overcome the immediate challenges towards recovery after the collapse of 14 years of Bashar Assad's regime. UN Special Envoy for Syria, Geir Pedersen, told the Security Council that there is a need of economic future and international support for Syrians. Syrians need an economic future, he added, welcoming humanitarian pledges made at the 9th Brussels conference on 17th March to support Syria's recovery. However, observing that more resources will be needed, he also urged fast and broad sanctions easing. Tom Fletcher, Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, cited progress on the expanded cross-border deliveries and mentioned a need for member states to ease sanctions. At Security Council, Tom Fletcher urged decisive action to support people of Syria. Sanctions implemented by UN, EU and US against Syria have led to trade limitations, shortage of medical equipment, medical supplements and medicine, disruption of financial services and difficulties with international investments.
Wildfires raging across South Korea's southeastern region have claimed at least 24 lives and forced thousands of residents to evacuate. Thousands of firefighters, aided by the military, are battling wildfires in Wheatstone County, where over 27,000 residents have been evacuated. Strong winds and dry weather have fueled the blazes, destroying neighborhoods, closing schools and forcing the transfer of hundreds of inmates. Many victims are elderly, local authorities report. Amid firefighting efforts, a helicopter crashed midday Wednesday, killing the pilot. Turkey hopes to improve its relationship with the U.S. The Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan is in Washington for high-level talks with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio during a two-day visit. The meetings aim to strengthen bilateral ties and address key regional challenges.
Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan met with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Washington on Tuesday. The two-day visit follows a phone call between Donald Trump and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan that a top Trump aide described as transformational. Ties between both countries have drifted away from a strategic partnership in recent years. The trip comes as Ankara wants America to remove sanctions and let the country back into a crucial fighter jet program. Ankara is seeking a warming of ties with Washington under the new administration. Discussions will cover a range of regional issues, including the situations in Ukraine, Palestine and Syria, with an emphasis on exploring further opportunities for cooperation.
In a new round of muscle show, Iran and US are showing off their military readiness as well as drumming up the hostile rhetoric. More from political analyst Taras Shiralilo in Tehran.
The Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran on Tuesday unveiled a large military site, in fact, a missile site, which is dubbed as Missile City because of its largeness, which showed hundreds of packed projectiles, ballistic missiles, which were visited and unveiled by military commanders of the IRGC. And in fact, at the same time, the spokesperson of the Iran's Atomic Energy Organization yesterday said that Iran will retaliate strongly and with severe response to the countries that are trying to reimpose United Nations Security Council sanctions resolutions against Iran in coming October, and as they call it, a snapback or a trigger mechanism. At the same time, there are reports that United States is building up its military facilities on the Indian Ocean island of Diego Garcia, apparently in an attempt to bolster its build-up against the Houthi forces in Yemen. All of this is coming as unconfirmed reports said that U.S. President Trump has threatened with military action if Iran doesn't enter into negotiations over its nuclear program in a matter of 2 months. Of course, Iran has not categorically rejected negotiations, but said that it will not negotiate under pressures or under bullying of the United States, which it calls as a maximum pressure campaign.
The Romanian Parliament has approved the draft law on initiating the process of the Republic of Romania's accession to the European Union. The civil contract faction backed the bill with 64 votes, while the opposition was split. One faction voted against and another abstained. The government also revised the wording, removing a reference to the will of the people and emphasized democratic development security as a rule of law. However, Deputy Foreign Minister Parul Hovhannisyan clarified that this does not yet mean Armenia is officially applying for European Union membership. As the European Union continues its expansion discussions, one country's name was notably absent: Georgia. While Ukraine, Moldova and Western Balkans took center stage in European Council, President Antonio Costa's remarks, Georgia's path to integration remains uncertain. With stalled reforms, political tensions and growing concerns over democratic backsliding, is Tbilisi losing its place on the EU's priority list?
European Council President Antonio Costa did not mention Georgia while discussing EU enlargement process during his speech in Brussels on March 25, instead emphasizing work with Ukraine, Moldova and Western Balkans. His omission raises questions about Georgia's standing in EU expansion process. Despite holding the candidate status, Georgia's European integration has stalled. The ruling Georgian Dream Party has delayed further progress until 2028. Citing the need for internal reforms. However, critics argue that the government policies, including democratic backsliding and its strained relations with Brussels, have contributed to its exclusion of EU priorities. The opposition and civil society groups blame the government for deliberately slowing the integration process, warning that Georgia is risking falling behind other candidate status. While the EU has not altered its stance, Costa's remarks reflect a shift in focus towards the countries demonstrating actively engagement. With political tensions in Georgia high and uncertainty over its long-term European course, the coming months will be crucial for determining whether the country faces further distance from Brussels or regain the momentum. It's Nina Nikolaishvili reporting from Tbilisi, News.
But Russian President Alexander Lukashenko has been sworn in for a 7th term during a ceremony in Minsk.
Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko was sworn in for a 7th term on Tuesday during a ceremony held at the ceremonial hall of the Palace of Independence in Minsk. The event, which was attended by more than 1,100 guests, included a formal presentation of the national flag and the presidential standard just before Lukashenko's arrival. Lukashenko's re-election was confirmed after the 26th of January presidential election, where he secured more than 5.1 million votes, representing nearly 87% of the total votes cast. The 70-year-old president has been in power since 1994.
Kyrgyzstan has officially ratified a key border treaty with Tajikistan. The move marks a significant step toward resolving a century-long border dispute between the two nations. The two countries had been in disagreement over 503 kilometers of their approximately 970-kilometer border.
President Sadir Japarov of Kyrgyzstan has signed a law ratifying the treaty on the Kyrgyz-Tajik state border, which was agreed upon with Tajikistan on March 13th in Bishkek. According to the Presidential Press Service, Kyrgyzstan's Supreme Council approved the law on March 19th. The law was created to officially define the Kyrgyz-Tajik border and complete the necessary state procedures for recognizing and ratifying the treaty. The establishment of a legal framework between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan aims to ensure stability and security, improve conditions for citizens, especially in border regions, and strengthen socio-economic and humanitarian cooperation, the presidential administration stated. On March 13th, President Sadir Japarov and Emomali Rahmon held a bilateral meeting in Bishkek. Following their talks, they signed the treaty on the delimitation and demarcation of the Kyrgyz-Tajik border. The border issue between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan has been going on since 1924, with the two countries repeatedly clashing. Thousands of people have been killed in conflicts along the border in the past 30 years. This agreement would settle issues related to nearly 500 kilometers of frontiers. It also includes clauses stipulating mutual access to water and energy facilities along the border.
On China's growing presence in Central Asia, especially Kazakhstan, in the form of investments and loans for developing infrastructure, energy and industry, we earlier spoke to international relations expert Nurbulat Nishinbayev from Almaty.
When we talk about Chinese presence in Kazakhstan in general, Chinese philosophy towards financial investment and the others are quite different than the Western. We know from the history when we made a business, when we get aid from the Western, one of the main criteria was the democracy, liberal ideas, creating inclusive society. When we trade with Chinese government, usually they don't require such a kind of requirements, open transparency in government, etc., etc. So I think that will be one of the differences of Chinese existence in Kazakhstan, including in Central Asia. But however, in international relations, in the last couple of years, we have seen Chinese trap diplomacy, financial trap diplomacy, that's becoming quite popular across the globe. I think that would be even better when we look at Chinese philosophy towards financial policies. But to be short, Kazakhstan started even more serious Chinese vector of their foreign policy, because Kazakhstan historically had held multi-vector foreign policy. One of the eastern vector was China. I think it's a time to rise back Chinese vector in order to keep the balance in the region.
Millions in Afghanistan are struggling to access clean water as aid agencies warn of a deepening crisis. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has more on that.
Afghanistan is facing a worsening water crisis with millions struggling to access clean drinking water and basic sanitation. Aid agencies warn that the situation is critical and requires urgent action. According to the UN Habitat, an estimated 21 million Afghans, more than half of the population, are in desperate need of water, sanitation, and health services. Major cities like Kabul, Kandahar, and Herat are seeing rapidly depleting groundwater reserves, raising concerns over long-term sustainability. Stephanie Luce, a senior official at UN Habitat, says Afghanistan's water infrastructure is in urgent need of investment. Without large-scale intervention, she warns the country's already fragile humanitarian situation could deteriorate further. The crisis was also highlighted by the International Committee of the Red Cross on March 22nd, coinciding with World Water Day. The ICRC reported that 33 million Afghans, around 80% of the population, are now facing severe water shortages. The impact is devastating, affecting people, affecting public health, food security, and the economy. Despite these alarming warnings, Afghanistan's Ministry of Water and Energy has pushed back against the ICRC's findings. Officials claim the government has launched several projects to combat drought, including the construction of new water dams. But as the crisis deepens, the question remains, will these efforts be enough to secure Afghanistan's water future? Aid agencies say more action is needed and time is running out. This is Tamim Bahiz in Kabul for A News.
Thank you for tuning in and stay tuned to A News. Have a wonderful night.